Good evening, everybody, and thank you for joining us. You know exactly who I am because you know what channel you're on right now. And I've got a special guest with me. Go ahead and introduce yourself.
This is Michael French from Retro Blasting, and I am always excited to be on LioConvoy. As you know, everybody out there who knows me, I am a huge fan of LioConvoy, so it's always an honor to be here.
And we're all still trying to figure out why. But let me go ahead and say hi to the chat here real quick since we got a few people hopped in. We have Neon Look, Jack of All Claws, happy birthday, by the way. Sergeant British Carver Guy, Harvey Pliskin, Toon Logic Studios, Sketchy T, Majumaru Fan, Born Jorgensen, Dominic, Futogun, Jesse Guarardo, The Stooge, Arturo Trevino, Fearless Wolf, Jeb Jam, Toku Prime, The Purple Artist, Yanada-chan 360, Stardust Todoroki, David 315842, and Wolfie762 so far. So, Veraboo Haas. So, what we're going to be discussing today is something that actually came out of a conversation I had with a friend of mine, somebody who helps the channel out a lot of times, named Dusan, aka Grim. Grim is a longtime fan of these nostalgia properties, these legacy properties. He's done some absurdly heavy lifting in a lot of directions. For example, he remastered and properly color coded several model sheets from Thundercats to be cell accurate via his own research. It took him around a month or so. He also does a lot of upscaling of various different things to increase their quality. He's a very skilled man when it comes to stuff like that. So we were talking, and we come to a bit of a disagreement here concerning nostalgia properties. And I asked Michael if he'd like to do a stream on it. And it helps piggyback off of the video Michael did the other day about why it's okay to let stories end. And I think it's an interesting point of conversation because there's going to be variables, and I'd like to try to pin down some of the values people have, because one thing people have learned that I'm very fond of is consistency. So my values of whether or not something is good or not, or whether or not something is acceptable, it's going to be very solid, defined in one direction or another most of the time. But in this case, I'm kind of trying to figure out where the standard should be, if there should be one. Generally, my standard is source material, but there's other properties that kind of hard to pin down. So let's go ahead and get some thoughts here. Michael, what reboots and nostalgia properties have you seen?
Oh gosh, I remember seeing the. I know it's not the Four Horsemen, but that's what they called the toy line. I saw the Masters of the Universe relaunch in the early aughts, the animated show. I saw, I believe, the first two episodes of the Thundercats relaunch back when it came out 15 years ago, whenever that was. Um, and of course, I've seen various episodes of different Transformers reboots, like Transformers Prime, things like that. So yeah, I've had a smattering of them. And then of course, if we're talking about movies and things like that, movie franchises getting some relaunches as well, I've seen a number of those. But as far as cartoons go, those are kind of, oh, and of course, I've seen up until the latest one, I've seen all of the Ninja Turtles stuff until the last one. So,
Okay, so here's the thing. When it comes to this, my sticking point is usually, of course, the source material and respecting
mhm.
it. And there's different ways you can respect source material, but at the same time, the struggle has to also come down to how much of this one thing do we see over and over again? Because as much as I do love these properties, I also understand that they are, well, owned properties. They're
Mhm.
not just independent stories that sit out in the ether. They want to keep them going because they make money off of it. And to a point, I understand that. But the question is whether or not they wind up dying due to brand fatigue, as we've seen in some cases with Star Wars here recently, to where they keep putting stuff out. But
Right.
there's some brands that I think, for lack of a better word, have earned the right to experiment.
Mhm.
And the two that come to mind are, of course, Ninja Turtles and Transformers.
Yep.
So here's the thing: if we say respect the source material, sometimes we question what source material do we respect here, because you and I, we grew up. You're older than me, so it's a little bit of
Mhm.
an age gap there. But you know the Mirage comics for Ninja Turtles.
Yes.
I know a
Yes, I
bit.
do.
I know a bit of it too, but we also both are very, very knowledgeable in terms of its place in the zeitgeist of the '87 cartoon.
Yes.
But we'll
Hmm.
say, respect the source material, but at the same time, when you look at it, the '87 Ninja Turtles cartoon was wildly different in terms of tone and sometimes character from the actual source material.
Right.
But we never really bring that up in these discussions. So that's one thing I'm just trying to feel out here. It's what is a consistent standard if there is any? Is it a matter of respecting the source material in some cases, or is there a matter of like the spirit versus the law of the source material? These are the things that I've just kind of been running into my thought processes here recently because we have somebody bringing up the latest Ninja Turtle cartoon. And the latest Ninja Turtle
Hmm.
cartoon was Rise of the TMNT, and it got a lot of backlash when it was announced because
Right.
character designs are wildly different. But with Ninja Turtles, it seems like they tend to hit a few specific notes, but everything else is a wide variable. Real quick for the chat, hit one if you saw and liked the 2003 Ninja Turtles cartoon. And I don't know, Michael, if you've seen that one to
Oh, I've
completion or
seen
not.
it. I've seen it. I've seen all the different Ninja Turtles until Rise, and only because I just didn't have access to it. So,
Okay, so
Mhm.
here's the thing. When I say Shredder, you think of uh, Ninja Master. You think of leader of the Foot Clan, who's highly trained, and his nemesis is Hamato Yoshi, right?
right, right. Hmm.
But in the 2003 cartoon that a lot of people enjoyed, while he was those things, he was also an alien warlord. He was an
Right,
Utrom who used the guise of Shredder because Shredder was not a creation of him. The Shredder was an ancient demon that he stole the lore from and the look to gain power in ancient Japan, which of course created his empire because Utroms are long-lived creatures, which is vastly different from the '87 Shredder and the original comic Shredder because that dude died issue one and then came back a couple other times and then died horrifically then. So the thing is, you have to question. Okay, if we're gonna tear apart something like Rise, we'd have to be consistent and do the same to the other versions, including the '87 cartoon. Now, Grim tells me there weren't many comics that were put out between 1984's initial comic and the 1987 cartoon. I'd imagine the '87 cartoon was in production at '86 at least. But at the same time, if we say respect the source material, do we make exceptions in some cases, or is it ultimately the sum of its parts that make the argument? That's my question. What do you think?
yeah. I've always felt like I don't mind. Here's I guess where I land on this. I don't mind when source material is changed as far as to experiment with a new attempt at the story. In other words, they're not trying to say that Rise, and I quote, you can correct me if I'm wrong, everyone, but my understanding is Rise of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles is not trying to be a continuation of everything that's come before. It's supposed to be kind of a different branch off the franchise tree. In other words, and I don't want to get into the whole multiverse thing, which I know the Ninja Turtles have explored in the past in their own franchise as well, with the Nickelodeon show a few years ago. But it's not as bothersome to me because they're not trying to square peg this version of the Ninja Turtles into the continuity of the '87 stuff. I do think some people end up getting crossways about getting mad about change because they just never want to see anything change. They never want a different spin on the story. And I think that has come from a lot of Hollywood productions that change the story up irrevocably but keep it within continuity. They say it's canon. They say this is still part of the original idea. And you go, this isn't going to work this way. And so then I think some people have spun off with that idea and they don't like seeing change ever anywhere, even if it's isolated from the other continuity. Does that make sense?
It does.
Like, yeah.
Real quick, thank you for $2 super chat, Brian Dillingham. Yes, Rise is its own continuity, and
Hmm.
it plays with the characters in different directions. And again, while I like Rise, I watched it. I'm also well aware the toy line was not good, It did
Right.
not sell well, and I think a lot of that comes down to the fact that the designs from Rise, while I like them, they don't translate well into 3D.
Hmm.
Same with other people's work in comics when they make action figures of a certain character's art style. People like Ed McGuinness, perfect, works fine in 3D for an action figure. But other people, not so much. But
Hmm.
with Rise, and this is where a lot of it comes down to. I think part of the problem isn't just the fact that we've been burned by, say, corporate Hollywood. I think part of it's also a lot of these rebrands, these reboots. People come on, they talk about it, people who work on the new ones, and they're very derogatory about the original. Um, we
Oh yeah.
we saw this with the new She-Ra cartoon. We saw this with He-Man Revelation, where previously they were really dogging on Filmation, and we've seen this in other directions here.
Yeah,
And
I did a whole video about it a few years ago called "Trashing the Classics,"
yeah, I
where
remember.
people get defensive about the new parts of the IP, and they decide to denigrate the classics as a way to shore up inferior writing in the new installments. Yeah.
Real quick to Mijumaru, I think one of the reasons people are saying that is because Transformers, in terms of the cartoons, have tried playing it a little too safe. While Transformers should be, and this is my consistent value, all these legacy properties should be child-friendly properties,
Yes, I agree
100%.
with that. I
I, I
agree with that 100%.
I think that with Transformers and the cartoons, they've, with the exception of course, the Netflix series, which is terrible in its own reason, um, I think that they go a little bit too kid safe, too kid friendly, and they don't push things enough. And I think that's probably because they're worried about advertisers, they're worried about longevity of the show. I can understand that, but that might be where they're coming from. As far as the toys go, despite the rising cost, the toys are decent. There's some issues
Hmm.
there. Hold on, Thundercats Roar 2. You know, there's a lot of things that are a problem with Roar, a lot of them. I have yet to run into somebody outside of like the Twitter sphere, which is not really directly what I'm talking about because that's only people like me that are on Twitter will see this. Like I've yet to see anybody go into interviews and trash the original cartoon. And before somebody comes in and say that Victor Courtwright did because he hates his brother, there's never a clip that says that. What people did was they saw that Roar was bad. They saw that Victor Courtwright talked about how he watched the original with his brothers, and they extrapolated their own interpretation of that and try to push it as fact. It's not quite the same thing. So here, let me go ahead and ask some questions here because we're focusing on reboot aspects here. Uh, Michael, I want you to give me the character specifics in terms of personality for Splinter.
Splinter is he's a haunted but I guess what you would call level-headed sensei. He has a past that he wrestles with, but it's not something where he was an immoral person. It was something where he found himself, depending on which version of the continuity you're talking about, he ended up making some mistakes. Obviously, the original 1984 comic has a completely different continuity for Splinter, and a different past. But he's a loving father. He is a teacher. He is he's in many ways the rock that grounds the four turtles. Um, that's how I would describe him.
Okay. In Roar, when we first meet Splinter, he is detached. He does not refer to any of the turtles by name, but by color. He is not much in the way of an instructor. He prefers to spend his time sitting in front of television watching old martial arts films or his stories. And we find out the reason for this. And this is I actually watched a few videos again because I watched them when they first came out by a laughable YouTuber by the name of Professor Geek who made all sorts of assumptions and presumptions about the new show and essentially doing one of those "this is why the West is dying" type of nonsense.
Hmm.
And he saw that Splinter was not the archetype that one would presume Splinter would be. You find out in the series that the reason why he is like this is because this version of Shredder is an ancient mystic armor that drives out the life force of whoever wears it and it is a demonic entity that wants to wipe out all life. And the Hamato clan in ancient times sealed it away, and every generation, one of them essentially has to sacrifice themselves to keep this thing locked away. And Splinter's mother did it when he was a child, leaving him completely parentless, save his grandpa. He wound up rejecting all of his traditional family values. He became a movie star, wound up being kidnapped by a yokai and fighting in the Battle Nexus before he was mutated into a rat, and wound up saving 4 turtles that have his DNA now due to that mutation. So he's not like Master Splinter in the original cartoon or even like the 2012 cartoons, closer to our age. This Splinter is not. He's depicted as seeming to be much older. He is past his prime. He used to be a movie star. He used to have all this stuff going for him, but now he's a mutated rat who lives in the sewers with 4 teenage rapscallions. And throughout the series is when he starts, picking up the fact that he does need to be the leader of this group. He does need to care more for his children. They actually do differently than other series do. They don't keep Splinter there as an archetype throughout. He's a flawed character in ways that the others are not. Like, say, the 2012 Splinter was flawed in the sense that he kept things from his kids. And he kept things from the kids to try to protect them. Whereas this one just does it out of apathy. And that's actually one reason why I like Rise. Because there are times that people have to understand your parents are not perfect. And they are flawed.
Yeah.
Because a lot of us grow up with this idea that, our parents do everything the right way because they're our parents and yada yada. Well, yeah, Rise acknowledged the existence of the Battle Nexus. Rise had a lot of different references. Well done ones in this case, not ones like, say, in Transformers Animated where they tried to get it to make up for the lack of decent writing. But just like, hey, there's that character in the background. They use this character's audio for this other character. Donatello's little flying backpack that has a voice is voiced by the original voice actor for Michelangelo. So, yeah. It's also variant in how the turtles act, and a lot of people get really mad at this because they think all the turtles are acting like Michelangelo from the original cartoon, but they're not. And I think part of this, Michael, is the age gap, because and you talked about this in your video that we as adults we want to, I guess, cling on to these as though they're ours, and to a point I think that can be justified. Hey, Rodimus, glad to see you here. Rodimus, if you want to join us, let me know. We'll try to figure out a way to do that. I didn't invite you to this because I thought you were at church on Saturday nights. But in some cases, people get really critical of it. But what I was going back to the age gap thing is they're mad essentially because when you look at this show, the turtles in this are, number one, they're 13.
Right.
But they act like teenagers.
Mm-hmm.
And they won't let go of their cell phones. They talk back to their father. They get into mischief. They goof around in bizarre ways. And I think that sometimes because we're older and we're watching these properties meant for younger people, I think that's part of why we get a little more critical than we should in that direction.
Mm-hmm. The Ninja Turtles, of course. I mean, I was a heavy reader and rereader of the original 1984 comics as a kid. I didn't have them in 84. I had the first collected volumes. And I remember in those comics that the Ninja Turtles were depicted as teenagers. They got into scuffles, they argued, yeah, of course they were still cool, martial arts superheroes at the same time, but it was never an issue. I mean, just look at how obviously the cartoon in 1987 took it, in a fun-loving direction, and then the 1990 movie hybridized the two ideas, but they still remained teenagers. And, the teenagers are just reinterpreted through whatever lens or decade the show is being made in. So I don't see an issue with that at all. And I think you're right. Maybe some people, it's that whole idea of I want these things to age up with me so that I don't have to feel embarrassed that I'm still actively into it in the present day. So in that sense, some fanboys might be thinking, I'm going to demand that the Ninja Turtles become serene and serious and dignified, or have an edgier sense of humor, or whatever it is, not remembering what they really are.
And
that happens with Transformers and Batman as well, and all these other characters.
well, when it comes to this, I think part of the disconnect is when we were teenagers, we did not act like the teenagers of the modern age. And I don't mean that as in, we were far more intelligent and far more dignified. No, we had different outlets.
Yeah.
Michael probably went to things like arcades and whatnot. They don't exist now. What do kids have instead? They have things like Discord. They oddly enough, I think teenagers probably play D&D more than our generation did.
Yeah.
And how they operate and interact with the world is different than how we did. And I think a lot of people don't really realize that. So they'll see characters like the Turtles from Rise, and they'll think, well, that's just wholly irresponsible, without remembering the fact that teenagers as a whole tend to be.
Uh-huh. Mm-hmm. I think that's very astute, Lio. I think that's correct.
When considering how current narratives of law enforcement are being discouraged, I feel like cops should be brought back, but more gritty animated cop drama. Thoughts in chat? No. Again, here's the thing that a lot of people I think do not understand. What is considered gritty or mature, with the exception of sexual stuff, is theming.
Yep.
And I think that that's part of our generation being, for lack of a better word, illiterate when it comes to reading themes. So we'll watch the first episode of Thundercats as kids, and we'll pick up on the fact that Thundera is gone. We'll pick up on the fact that Lion grew up out of nowhere, that Jaga's gone. But the thing is, when we're older, that's when we pick up Slides and the Mutants just picked off a whole bunch of innocent people. They're all dead now, and the show doesn't make that come back. That's what things with subtext will do, and that's also what things that have different layers will do. You can have something super ultra mega violent with tits all over the place, and it can be the most immature thing in the world.
Yeah.
It all comes down to how it's written and how it's competently done. And I think part of the problem when we get older is we either... gotta ban this thing in chat. I don't do spam links. Boom. Nah, Lio, say it like it is, because I saw an argument with grown A people who couldn't even understand Encanto simple themes. Oh, don't start. Anywho, let's see here. I was going somewhere, and then I got lost because I had to ban that account. We see modern stuff just at a glance. And I talked about this a little bit in the last stream you and I did, where people will say, well, cartoons aren't like they were when I was a kid. Well, you're right, they're not. But that doesn't necessarily mean all of them are bad. That doesn't necessarily mean all of them are piss-poor entertainment. And to be honest, that also doesn't mean everything we watched back in the day was really, really good, too. At some point in your life, in anybody's life, I think, if they go revisit something they enjoyed as a kid, sometimes they'll find out this wasn't as good as I remember it being. And that's because it served the purpose it did at that time. And if you notice, these are never the properties people want to age up with them. I think part of that problem is not just the possessiveness we tend to have. And again, I'll get back to this in a moment, that I think that might be earned to a point. But we've got to learn to meet the middle ground. And I think that's what people like me try to do, to where I'm okay, within reason, for reboots, reimaginings and whatnot, so long as the writing is competent and so long as they don't stray too far from source material. And what I mean by too far from source material, and this is going to get me some heat, in chat, and for whoever watches else, I think a show like the 2011 Thundercats is a good example of too far from source material. Real quick, $5 super chat from Avatar Machuru. My opinion is when properties change for the times to add elements of what's happening now, it's fine, like the Proud Family is doing now. I actually saw some episodes of that. It's really good. And what I mean by 2011 Thundercats is, okay, the premise for Thundercats is they're an alien race that has to make do on a new planet. The new planet is ran by an ageless devil priest that is really, really pissed because now he's got a bunch of do-gooders on his planet that are mucking up all of his business. Because the Thundercats operate by specific moral values that are contrary to Mum-Ra's. And that's what makes him mad. 2011 Thundercats isn't like that. The 2011 Thundercats is about one group of douchebags fighting an ancient eviler douchebag over the right to be the biggest douchebag, essentially. Mum-Ra's entire plan there was he created all these different animal races, and he wants to set the order in the universe by controlling the Power Stones, and the Eye of Thundera is one of them, and it's all technological and mystical and all that. But the entirety of the Thundercat Empire in that cartoon was built off of taking over other places by force and killing them and enslaving them in some cases and treating them like second-class citizens. The Thundercats in 2011 start out as literal racists. And every character is distinctly different from the original iteration. That, I think, is too far out. When the heroes don't even operate off of heroic moral values, and I don't even mean growing into them, because the 2011 series didn't even do that in the first season. There was a little bit of growth, but not much. That's a problem. Real quick. LioConvoy, how familiar are you with Puff the Magic Dragon cartoon trilogy? Oh, I saw that years ago. Reboot of it would be good for the world? I think it'd be good for kids. Because that's what Puff... And again, that's part of the issue. Children properties should maintain as children's properties. And if you do it right, it can appeal to a large group of people. And if anybody doesn't believe me, go watch Batman the Animated Series and tell me I'm wrong, because you won't be able to.
I don't understand why they can't maintain that balance. That's what drives me nuts. And I know that you were saying that you think in some respects, I know you haven't explained yourself fully yet, about how you think in some respects our sense of ownership with these properties is earned. I don't know if we can make that claim about things that were created in like 1938, 39. And we just co-opted them in our own youth because they came down the conveyor belt when we were of age. But we have, as a generation, tried to own them. And that's very strange. I mean, yeah, I can see us, because Transformers became a brand when we were young and Ninja Turtles became a brand when we were young. Okay, fine. Why do we get to also drag Superman and Batman and Spider-Man into these kinds of edgier proclivities? Well, I'm not really sure why.
Well, let me go ahead now and explain, so this is a good segue for it. I believe in a lot of 80s properties we have some form of ownership. Not, of course, tangible. I'm not going to be able to walk into Warner Bros. And say, hey, give me that cartoon. I wish I could. Doggone it, I wish I could. And the people in the chat probably wish I could either. But when I say like some form of ownership, is none of those properties would be viable right now if fans did not keep them alive for the past 30 years. It wouldn't be. And there's a reason, one of the reasons, of course, why Roar failed outside of its initial pitch issues, outside of how people operated on Twitter, and outside of the quality or lack thereof of the cartoon itself. It was too far. It was too far of a difference, and it didn't really appeal to anybody for the most part. There's the occasional exceptions. Kecker's boy will probably be in this chat at some point. He's a pretty big fan of Roar. We don't have any beef over that, but he's unfortunately, in the case of Roar, one of the few people from the original fandom that actually likes it. And another way I'd say we have ownership is we do a lot of the heavy lifting as fans for these legacy properties. Look at what James Etalk has done in helping He-Man and the Masters of the Universe gain information for printing books or for factual information about the Filmation cartoon, because he's done the legwork. He's been in the Filmation archives. Amon did all that too in terms of uncovering specific details that these properties, or rather property owners, they genuinely don't know what they own. If you were to walk up to a Warner Brothers executive who's over all the media stuff, she's listed on the website, and ask, hey, can you tell me about the lost intro of Thundercat? She'd have no clue what you're talking about.
Right.
Because they don't know. They buy properties, they don't study them. The only way they study them is, hey, do you think we'd make money off this? The answer is yes, we'll buy it. They don't have a care for any of this stuff. That's why I say this. That's why I say we have some form of ownership to it. Because for it to be successful, they have to rely on us to promote it or to consume it. And that's why, unfortunately, Thundercats has failed so miserably, because all of their takes have been so god-awful. There's a reason many 80s properties haven't gotten a real reboot yet. Transformers, Thundercats, Ghostbusters, etc. do. To a point. Lio, how many creating new cartoons that gives off nostalgic vibes? I've had one in mind that seems like Gargoyles and TMNT, but many elements set apart from others. It varies. Let's see, to Lio and Retro, what do you think about children's cartoons talking about serious topics like Static Shock, talking about racism and gun violence and not dumbing down the message? I'm all for it, personally.
Yeah, I agree with you. it's like what you said about Batman the animated series. It's time to find that balance again. It's time to say we're not going to talk down to kids, but we're also not going to hijack these as adults. And I think Batman the animated series is a perfect example of how you walk that balance beam. It's also rightly considered one of the best cartoons ever made ever. And maybe people in the industry should be taking notes from that.
And real quick, since we talked a little bit about comics, and that's where Static comes from, and at some point, Majima, I probably will check out the comics itself. You asked why these comics get a little darker. I think that actually, one point of argument I might have here, or disagreement, I think very little of that's actually outside interference from people who demand more. I think it's just the fact that the world's just kind of, due to information spread, seemingly gotten worse. Back in the 30s and 40s, what would Batman do? He'd foil the Joker, who would do outlandish schemes, and occasionally somebody would get killed. Occasionally. Now, like, if somebody were to write that story, yeah, you might get some people that enjoy it, but there are people but isn't Batman supposed to be like the dark avenger of crime? And he's fiddling with this dude when there's real crime going out. Like, I have this panel here, or this page, that kind of talks about the change. And it has Riddler sitting there, and he says, "We hung out together at What a Way to Go. It was great. All those were all the guys we never see anymore. Bookworm, King Tut, Egghead, Marcia, Queen of Diamonds. Where did they all go? Batman and Robin were part of the fun. They were the straight men, but we were the stars. No one ever hurt anybody. Not really. Nobody died. You look around these days, it's all different. It's all changed. The Joker's killing people, for God's sakes. Did I miss something? Was I away when they changed the rules?" Batman, I think, specifically Batman, has evolved to its level of darkness because of two reasons. Number one, the world gets worse. And number two, it's mostly adults that are consuming comics now. There are children's comics. Heck, there's children's versions of these comics. But the ones that you and I would read are geared to us now. They're not geared towards kids. And that, I think, is more to do with us just being the primary consumer of it more than it is us taking some form of ownership. We just held on to it in terms of what we consumed.
But that's where it's the chicken or the egg argument. Are we the ones that are primarily consuming comics because they kept making them edgier, much like certain video game consoles as they evolved, they kept just chasing our age demographic rather than staying where they were? Like Nintendo primarily stayed with, younger kids with every iteration of its console, whereas PlayStation, Xbox, all those others, Genesis or Sega, they kept chasing the major demographic that they started with. So everything kept aging up. So with comics, I wonder, it's like, are comics dominated by adult buyers because we were just the only ones that kept buying them? Or is it because slowly but surely, before they could look back and realize what they'd done, they were just keeping up with the buyers of the 90s and just keeping up with their age? And then they realized they'd left all the kids behind. That's what I don't know how to pin down.
Well, unfortunately, I think a lot of the people we'd be able to ask about that have already gone.
Yeah.
Like, Dennis O'Neil would have been a perfect person to ask. He'd probably have a very concise, very well tuned answer for that. I mean, technically you could ask Chuck Dixon, but apparently he's kind of gone off the rails, and I don't know if I want to poke that bear. As much as I did enjoy his work, specifically in the 90s. I mean, he created Bane, for God's sake. But unfortunately, some of these people have kind of lost their minds throughout the years. Go, let's see, instead of another Batman show, I'd like an animated series based on the Shadow. I mean, I wouldn't complain.
I wouldn't either. I love the Shadow. I'd love that.
But part of it is a lot of people from our generation, Michael, they follow these old properties, and they don't move past the original iteration of these old properties, so they don't really understand what's going on. So, like, what I'll say is, okay, so Transformers is a really good example of this. You and me, we watched and enjoyed the original Transformers cartoon, right? But I kept watching Transformers consistently. I dropped off somewhere in the middle of Armada. I wound up, of course, turning 18, and life got in the way, and I didn't pick up Transformers again actively until Prime.
Yeah.
But the difference in that case is that because I've always followed animation my entire life, always enjoyed animation from all sorts of decades, I'm a lot more tolerant. But you take somebody who watched the original Generation 1 cartoon and you try to throw them in front of RID 2015, they're not going to like it. It's going to be, they'll say it's too far gone, it's garbage. Now, will they be able to tell you why they think it's garbage? No, not really. And if they tell you, well, it's too much like kid friendly stuff, but then you point to an episode of season 2 in the G1 cartoon. Like, we've gotta be cognizant. We have to be self aware. We have to be aware that the cartoons we watched as kids were kids shows. They're not more, they're not less. They're good ones, but they're still kids shows. And sometimes I think that along with wanting properties to age with us, we think the things we did watch have maintained its maturity with us. And in some cases, that might be right with, like, Batman the Animated Series, but in cases of things like Generation 1 Transformers, probably not so much. That's what I've seen here.
Yeah, I mean, I've revisited so many cartoons over the years, done videos about them. It's not funny. I'm very familiar with a lot of the things we grew up with. G.I. Joe is one of the most silly, immature cartoons, and I say immature not in any derogatory way. I simply just mean it's not the edgified IDW comics that people would like to believe it was. You know, there's nothing wrong with presenting a simple, easy to understand message to a child. There's nothing wrong with imparting moral values in a simple, clear way for them to understand. But for some reason, a lot of people in our generation have decided that, like you said, those cartoons were far more sophisticated than they ended up being. Some had moments of profundity. Like, you know, when I rewatched Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends, there were like 2 episodes in there that were kind of like, you know, eyebrow raising, where it was like, whoa, they went there. But the vast majority of the cartoon was not like that at all. It was just very straight up, you know, superhero hijinks on Saturday morning. Nothing to get worked up over. It's a strange place that we find ourselves in culturally at the ages that we're at, because pop culture has finally become dominant in when we were kids, as you and I love to say, you know, kids were into the stuff we were into were getting pushed into lockers. And nowadays it's trendy and mainstream in many of these respects, many of these franchises, to be into it and be okay being public about that. But I think with that comes the industry wanting to chase that nebulous concept that they've never really been able to define, which is the mainstream audience. And in doing so, they edge some of these things closer and closer and closer to Game of Thrones level content. Mm-hmm. And just don't know, you know, I don't like seeing Prince Adam getting graphically stabbed through the back.
But Michael, it's hardcore. Aren't you an adult and you like stuff like that?
No, I don't, and I'm not trying to sit there and say that things shouldn't ever change. I love a continuation of the story that respected the material, but I don't mean in the sense of everything has to stay the same. I mean tonally, and for the right audience, it needs to stay the same. Keep the story evolving, absolutely, but don't throw the story into a gladiator arena where a bunch of people over the age of 35 are thirsting for blood. That's not Masters of the Universe.
No.
I don't know.
Real quick, John Caulfield, I've been trying to bully Michael into watching Beast Wars. He has all the seasons now. He just needs to find time for it. That's ultimately the issue.
And I'm not opposed to watching Beast Wars. I have no negative pallor over it whatsoever. I do not judge things I have not seen. And I would love to sit down and watch Beast Wars. So. And
let's see here. There was a question somebody just asked. Let me see if I can find it again. Somebody here was talking about one episode of G.I. Joe, Cobra Commander wanted his face carved to the moon. I mean, I'm all for that level of petty. just as a principle. But no, you're not wrong. I mean, as much as I do love the original G.I. Joe cartoon, I'll have people say, man, the original G.I. Joe cartoon was so hardcore, it was so realistic military. I'm like, dude, they fought Egyptian gods on one episode. What are you on about?
Yeah. That right there's nostalgia glasses that have blurred their vision. And that blinded them.
Yeah, and I think that's part of the problem. As much as people say they like these properties, they get so inundated with the toys that they don't even remember the cartoon truly.
Yeah.
And of course, we've experienced some of that in just how people recount things. And even people like Joe Amato or Grimmerai, we've dealt with that too. Again, the whole suspension capsule issue is, well, they said it malfunctioned. No, they didn't. They did. It's in the episode. I will give you $100 to prove it is. And of course, then they
Mm-hmm.
can't because it doesn't exist. There's other explanations given later on in other materials, but it's not quite what they said.
Yeah. Yeah. It's that whole Mandela effect thing all over again. Oh yeah, there was definitely a alternative version of the opening episode of GI Joe. No, there wasn't. There's only one. Oh, I could have sworn I saw blah blah blah. It's like, no, you didn't. No.
Yeah. Real quick, somebody asked for our opinion on Sailor Moon Crystal. I'm going to go ahead and tell you right now, Michael has never seen that. So, asking for his opinion of it, yeah. My opinion of Crystal, I'm glad that it sticks closer to the manga, but ooh, the first animation was real rough. I had to go back and fix it. He-Man 2002 holds up better despite it being for kids. I actually like the Filmation He-Man. I think it holds up fairly well. I just think people go back and expect it to be something it isn't, which is again part of the inherent issue here.
Yeah, Filmation He-Man has beautiful animation. It's got great storytelling. It's wildly imaginative in a good way, and I think it holds up really well. And I truly believe that Skeletor is the conduit that keeps an aging individual plugged into it, because Skeletor's performance, the writing behind him, the humor, it ages well. Like it I don't know. I have nothing but praise for that show and how Lou Scheimer tackled it. I love that show.
Yep, Skeletor is the villain that wakes up and says, "I am alive today, and I'm going to make it everybody else's problem."
Yeah, yes. Yes.
I mean, even in the He-Man documentary, Jim Detox said, he thinks that Skeletor is more popular in the He-Manism brand now because several generations of people have embraced him primarily through memes. So what do? They look at the memes and they watch video clips. They're like, I love this guy. He's derogatory, he's insulting, and he's petty. And the modern generation of kids like petty villains, which is fine. That's Skeletor's purpose. He's both petty. In the first season, he was much bigger a threat. Got turned down for the second season because parents' groups wouldn't shut up.
Because who wouldn't shut up?
Parents' groups. People throwing
Oh yeah, yeah.
baby
Parents
rage
group.
fits over it. And one thing we have to be very careful of, especially as we get older, and those of us who have kids, we to a point the old saying is we all turn into our parents, but that's
Yeah.
a choice. The stuff I liked as a kid, of course, my parents were always really critical of, in both whether or not I would watch it, and then if I did watch it, they'd always keep an eye on it. The worst thing you can do is see your kid watch something and just unironically, like not teasing, like being genuine, saying that's garbage. I don't know why you watch it. Engage with them a little bit. Find out why. Like I'll talk to again adults in these groups, and somebody will say, "Oh, new cartoons are terrible," and I'll ask them, "Which ones have you seen?" None of them.
Yeah.
Then how would you know they're terrible? Well, I saw an image. Here's the kicker that a lot of people don't understand, because even for Rise, I was skeptical when I saw the images, but I also know enough about animation to know that still images don't tell you dick about animation.
That's right.
Hold on real quick. Rodimus Primeval says, I also believe season 3 of Transformers holds up storytelling wise, but Akon botched a lot. I agree. Hot take. The third season of Transformers was the best written season of G1. Cue my canceling on Twitter.
I know that there are people out there that love everything from the events of the '86 movie going forward. I was not one of those kids. I didn't watch season 3 because the movie was so unexpectedly jarring. Time frame, everything, we've been over this before. I
Yeah.
just it was such a bomb drop that I just kind of checked out at that point. It was like I was walking out of a grenade cloud after I saw that film.
Have you
And I
ever
just, yeah.
have you ever seen the storyboards for a few of those scenes?
Yeah, they're even more brutal than what made it onto the screen.
Right. real quick, thank you.
Yeah.
£3 super chat from David315842. For those of you not knowing, for the scene of the shuttle when the Decepticons attack, Braun got blown in half.
Mm-hmm.
It is so much better for the actual theatrical cut. Rodimus Prime was not a crybaby. Rodimus Prime was thrust into leadership and had a lot of self-doubt. I don't think he was a crybaby. I think, again, that's us remembering things instead of going back and watching it to see if it's accurate. Again, a good example of this is Snarf. A lot of people that watch Thundercats when they were younger, or even are in the fandom now who haven't watched it in a while, especially those who haven't grown up. I hate Snarf. Snarf's whiny. Snarf's annoying. Snarf was your mom. That was Snarf's purpose. His purpose was to be the character in the room that your parents understood. And I know this because that's what my mother did. We'd watch Thundercats, and Lionel would go do something dangerous. Oh, Lionel, you probably shouldn't do that. You should wait for the others. My mom would sit there crocheting, not even looking up, saying, he's right. Find out later in the episode, Snarf was right. Snarf's there for your parents to identify with, not for you to enjoy.
Yeah. Yeah, he's strategically placed.
Parents grew up with the reason. Parent groups are the reason why Ghostbusters cartoon lost its magic, became less good. Well, that and corporate stupidity and wanting to replace Lorenzo music. Worst decision ever. Mm-hmm. Justin Taylor, hey, Michael and Lio. As someone who has taken the time to watch as much as I have, I take time to understand with every changes. I will give it a shot with 27 surgeries. I had the time to. Well, I'm sorry to hear about all those surgeries. That sucks. It's okay to give something a shot, and in some cases it may not work out. Revelation, I think, is absolute dog crap, and that's, by the way, I want to go ahead and say this, I'm still working on that video. I want to create brand new assets. I really want to up my game in the content I produce in terms of quality of the content. Maybe not what I say, but in what I'm presenting on screen. Kevin Smith was the fall guy. Kevin Smith isn't the reason why that cartoon sucks. Granted, he doesn't help it. He's there so you don't look at Rob David. Rob David is the brand manager for Masters of the Universe, and every single bad decision made in that cartoon, every single trope that they reused comes from his work. And I wouldn't give that clown a dime. Go ahead.
I agree with you on that point. I'm just baffled to this day why people continue in our generation to not see through Kevin Smith for what he is. He's been a front man for these corporations, a marketing front man for 20 years. And yet, and specifically for the pop culture, geek culture silo. And yet, people still just line up to hear what he has to say next, even though he's been reading from various scripts from these companies and getting paid to do so for 2 decades.
It's because people don't pay attention. They look at what's made, but they don't look at what goes on behind it. That's why when people will talk to me about different things that happened in the 80s in the animation, they're like, "Oh, this happened because of this." I'm like, "No, it didn't." I had a dude try to argue with me once a few years ago about who animated Thundercats. He was like, "Well, Tokyo Movie Shinji did, or Shinjo did." I'm like, no, they didn't. "Yeah, they did. You can see it in the show." I'm like, "They didn't. Pacific Animation did. Here's where it says so in like every bit of production material." "Well, we're just gonna have to disagree." It's like, this isn't a disagreement. You're just wrong.
Yeah.
We have to be cognizant, and we have to be aware. And then, yeah, I know that people talk about Scrappy Doo as well. That's a valid point. He wound up getting flanderized later on. And you see that with other characters as well. As much as I hate to say this, because I'm not a fan of Dragon Ball Z as it is, I've watched a little bit of Super, and I've read the manga. Somehow we've managed to get Goku, of all people, flanderized. The most simple character I've ever seen in fiction is now a flanderization. And unfortunately, things like Super are the good counterpoint to let fans handle things, because that entire manga is drawn by a fan, and it's god-awful. So sometimes even continuations aren't very good either. And I have people in the chat talking about Caillou. I've never seen Caillou because despite being in that generation, when I was a kid, I never watched things like Thomas the Tank Engine or Caillou, stuff like that. How about Super Friends versus Justice League? Super Friends, here's where I come back to this. I'm cognizant enough. I have enough knowledge of '80s in the political sphere of how the cartoons operated as well as their function. Super Friends did the best they could to adapt the characters as they were written at the time, as well as standards and practices. Like if you and they'd said it in interviews, if you have the character shrunk into default small form and they beat a spider and the spider has to be shown to be okay at the end of it. Like that's how absurd they got in terms of trying to make things PG for these kids.
Yeah, because the '70s was very heightened in that regard. It's kind of like where we are now in some respects. Well, actually, no. Sorry, I meant not now. Now,
Yeah.
sorry. Never mind.
Andrew,
Scratch that.
sorry, Andrew Hagar says, LioConvoy, how would you retool such cartoons as Lunatics Unleashed or Roadruggers or the Danger Mouse reboot? I would never touch Lunatics Unleashed. Lunatics Unleashed is the inverse of Thundercats Roar. As I love Looney Tunes characters. You cannot take Looney Tunes characters and make them hardcore and edgy. You can't make them
Hmm.
anime-esque. You leave them alone. That's one of those things that I would never want to touch because there is so much behind them, so much skill, craftsmanship, thought out stuff that I would just never touch them.
Yep.
As far as Road Rovers, I haven't seen enough of that or even remember enough of that to comment. And Danger Mouse, same issue. Uh, I actually enjoyed Dragon Ball GT, specifically the later season. Not really fond of the first one. Let's see here. It's strange to me that Rob David wrote Turtles Forever. It's not to me. You want to know why it's not to me? Because he treats the turtles from the original cartoon and Turtles Forever like infants. He flanderized every single one of them. He doesn't know what he's doing. He never does on anything he works on.
Hmm.
I have not seen or read Doctor Slump either, Harvey. I again, these are all issues of time. How about Mass? They did a two spin-offs, but never did any good. Couldn't tell you about that one. Three Stooges movie from 2012. Didn't see it. I did love the Doc Dodgers cartoon series though. That was fun. And now apparently we're getting a continuation of Futurama again.
Which, yeah, it, I, I think there are a few fragments of this discussion. I don't mean this specific one, but this broader discussion. There's a story that never ends because they keep resurrecting it, like with Futurama, or bringing back Blade Runner in a sequel 30 years later, or whatever. And those have varying degrees of quality. A new Matrix movie, 20 almost 20 years after the third one. And so that is a concern. Then you've got the things like we talked about earlier with creating new versions of shows. So like Rise of the Ninja Turtles is not the same thing as the 87 Ninja Turtles. They are, which is not the same thing as the 2003 or whatever it is. They're all separate products. They're all separate storylines. They're all separate universes if we want to get into the whole multiverse trend. Um so you have some stories where you go, they just keep punching out too many versions too fast. And so you end up with a stamp and a stamp pad that's run out of ink. It's like there's nothing left. There's nothing more we can do with this franchise. We have twisted the Rubik's Cube to its limit. There's nothing more we can do. It's worn out. But then there's other things like with Star Wars or some of these other series where they want to keep it in continuity as they keep putting out more material, and they want to keep wedging all the new continuity in to fit and retcon everything else. And so they end up diluting and breaking the original story. Whereas I would look at something like them and I'd say, I get it. Star Wars is really successful. I get it. It's really popular. You don't want to see the brand just die away. You've got money at stake. Why don't you just start a new universe? Like, in other words, stop the current continuity where it is, because you've already broken it, and just start over. I mean, there have been people who've been dying ever since that guy did that fan film a few years ago for his animation project. There have been people dying to see a anime style remake of Star Wars. Kind of like they did with the manga comics back in the day in the '90s, but animate that and make a whole new thing. I'm like, build off of something like that. But I'm just rambling now.
It's
I
all
think
right.
you know what I'm saying now.
Yeah, I do. Majimuro says, but what if too much change causes a revival and surge of interest rolled back into the old franchise? I'm just curious if this could affect the question. Not really to me, because while that can be a net good, if there's too much of a difference, people are going to start questioning a lot of things in perhaps the wrong direction, and then you're going to have mixed signals, for lack of a better word. In answer to your question, Badre, that's a question for Grimm. He knows a lot more about the Ruby Spears cartoon than I do. Michael might have seen more of it, but I didn't. Badre Bali is asking why we think the Ruby Spears Superman cartoon didn't do so well.
Part of it may have had something to do with, and I'm just speculating, I don't know. Part of it may have had something to do with the fact that Super Friends had been in reruns for so long that when Superman was reinterpreted, it it happened because they redid the comic book and everybody was burnt out on Super Friends, which became Superpowers, which became Superpowers Galactic Guardians. Superman's Ruby Spears cartoon was based very much on the John Byrne comic relaunch, which did well in comic book form. But at the same time, I believe that was 87 when that came out, Superman 4, The Quest for Peace came out as well. And that was a dog of a movie. That was a huge flop. So you're now seeing a solo Superman cartoon that's completely changed up its formula because of the new comic book direction. But it's using the Christopher Reeve theme, but it doesn't reflect Christopher Reeve movies, but it's people are tying it to that terrible film. I think there was just this kind of perfect storm of bad luck for that show in many respects. That's my best guess.
Mijumaru says, yeah, I guess that's fair considering the New 52. Can't believe that was a decade ago. Pulled back in old fans like me and so many new fans too. I just thought that was interesting. Well, that was its purpose. It was supposed to simplify things and bring people back to it. And it did. And then we got Flashpoint or before that. And of course, after that, we got Rebirth, which for the most part was decent. Real quick, somebody says Exo Squad tried being something new with anime-like stories and not afraid to kill off main characters. Another hard subject. Only lasted 2 seasons. Yeah. Sometimes you go a little bit too close to the sun. Wesley Bateman says, I feel like the minute someone at a production meeting or a meeting in these pre-production says something along the lines of how can we reinvent blank, we'll either go horribly wrong or a very slim chance of eating us. That's because I think what a lot of people miss is a lot of these properties we grew up with were passion projects of other people or a created thing because of an artistic drive, despite what some people will say. Yeah, some of them were based off of toys, but talk to a kid, give him a toy, watch him make stories, and tell me that doesn't have some sort of creative balance to it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But now it seems like the drive is, we own this property, make something.
Yeah, it's the whole, what do we have that we can go out there with? It's not what can we create. It's like, go look through our filing cabinets and find out what IPs we've got that we can go out there with. Which, again, isn't a new concept. I mean, like, when Star Wars came out in 77, suddenly all the movie studios were like, what sci-fi stuff do we have that we already own that we can go out there with? And Paramount was like, we have this thing called Star Trek? And they're like, ooh, do that. So that phenomenon's been around a little while, but now in the age of fewer studios with, behemoth amounts of IP that they've swallowed up, it becomes more problematic.
And the more things somebody takes on, the less quality those things are going to be. And that's generally true for just about everybody. With the exception of somehow Bruce Timm. I'm still trying to figure that one out. That man was in so many doggone Warner Brothers works in the 90s, and most of them were decent. And I'm still trying to figure out how he pulled that off.
Mm-hmm.
But
it's like most of the movie studios now it's the equivalent of eating at Golden Corral, where you're getting a meal, but it's a meal that's being made, buffet style for thousands and thousands of people a day. So, of course, the quality of your dishes, all the way down to the mac and cheese, isn't going to be as good as it is as if you focused that meal to prepare that meal for 4 people. So it is a problem.
Real quick, the Purple Artist says, I wonder where the modern Western cartoon versus anime debate came from when most modern cartoons are inspired by anime. Well, that debate's been going on for 50 years, but the modern iteration of it came from culture war idiots well, anime is better because anime doesn't have political messaging in it. When the truth is, they're just ignorant of Japanese politics.
Yeah, exactly. Everything has a certain amount of socio-political commentary in it, and that's. I mean, there are whole video compilations out there now talking about. Could you believe what that these were kids' cartoons in the '90s, and they show like all these crazy scenes from all these different cartoons, and they're all very loaded.
Yeah,
Um, you know.
because they didn't like talking down to kids. Um, like, how do I put this? I'm trying to remember something going on. I lost it. Continuing. Yeah, that happens sometimes. I'll
Yep.
get on a tear, and I know what it is. I'll have people, especially when we're talking about 80 cartoons in general on Twitter. They'll say, "Well, Thundercats, another cartoon for me to sell toys," and disregarding the fact that Thundercats wasn't. I'll say everything's trying to sell you something, everything, and they'll go on and say something like, "Well, Steven Universe doesn't try to sell you anything. It just teaches you to be empathetic to people." And I just sit there like staring at my screen, like, "What do you think what I'm telling you is? It's still selling you something. It's just not a product. It's an ideology. Now, whether or not it's good or bad is going to depend on, well, whether or not the message is good or bad." There's some cartoons that do not teach decent values. There's some cartoons that teach no values. I'd rather be taught no values than bad values.
Yeah, yeah. They're when I see these cartoons, I was talking about this with Melinda the other day because I was trying to think maybe there's a thought piece here somewhere. I find myself in a lot of current pop culture adaptations of these IPs getting to a point where they're blindly not they're blindly tone well, I guess tone deaf is not blind, it's deaf, but they're tone deaf to what's going on in the world right now culturally, sociopolitically, and everything else. They're still writing the villains the way they wrote them 30 years ago. And yet the villains and what they're doing, and I hope this makes sense when I finally get done rambling, but a lot of times I'm watching something and I find myself going, well, in this modern thing, what the villain wants makes more sense than what the hero is fighting for. In other words, I almost feel like in this show they have screwed up and the hero should be fighting for what the villain wants and the villain should be trying to stop the hero from doing. You see what I'm saying? Like it becomes this thing where it's almost like their values are out of date. I don't know. It's weird. I can't figure it out, but it messes with my head sometimes.
Real quick, Badri, yeah, you told me about that, I think, in the server the other day. And yes, Lizard Folk 4K, I really hate that how is this for kids mindset and ultimately serves to pull the medium back. That is true. And I hate to say it, but part of the problem is due to the 80s and how cartoons were made and the reason why a lot of them were made. But there's a modern problem of people thinking that cartoons are specifically for children and only children. Back in the 30s, 40s, 50s, cartoons were in movie theaters, and you saw them as independent projects, or you saw them with other films, and it was something all ages went into. And you see that reflected in our parents' generation. I don't know about Michael's parents, but there were many Saturday mornings where I'd wake up and I'd go see my old man, and what's my old man doing? He's watching Speedy Gonzales and having a time of his life. And that's normal, because when he grew up, cartoons weren't just for kids. They were an all ages thing. Now, because of the push for product and because of trying to get past a lot of regulation or changing the regulation in the case of a lot of these cartoons, they've been pushed as a primarily for kids thing. And not only have we struggled to get out of that, but the public perception of it will not change for a very long time due to that. And I had a conversation like that with a previous coworker once. I'm like, he looks at the stuff I'm looking at on my phone. Like, so you like cartoons? I'm like, yeah. He's like, well, I don't. I said, why? Like, because they're for kids. I looked at him and said, what do you think about Bugs Bunny? Oh, man, I love Bugs Bunny. He's hilarious. And I stopped for a second and said, it's a cartoon, right? He's like, but that's different. And I asked him, why is it different? He couldn't give me an answer. The answer is because of perception. Bugs Bunny was created for everybody. But the cartoons we grew up for were created for children. Sorry, I forgot your guest name. His name's Michael. But I've been talking about this on Twitter a lot about this trope of crazed revolutionaries, very anti-black in its exception. It's a power fantasy. I cannot speak on any of that. I'm Hispanic, so what?
I don't know if it relates to what he's trying to say, but I was rewatching a lot of Dark Knight the other day, and I'd already been thinking about this, but especially when Heath Ledger's Joker is in a lot of his major sequences where he's talking about what he wants to accomplish with, Gotham amongst all the mobsters and everything like that. Obviously, I'm not sitting there saying that, yeah, he's a serial killer or whatever, he's a psychotic or whatever. That's the part that they can keep in there to say, "Oh, but look, he's the villain." But it's like if you start to strip away those pieces of window dressing and you listen to what he's actually saying to people, he's fighting a corrupt establishment in an overt way rather than protecting said corrupt establishment. And he's also telling the mobsters in the city, the organized criminals, he's like, this city deserves a better class of criminal, read person, that operates and is motivated by something other than money. And then he sets this big mountain of money on fire to prove his point. And I sat there and I'm like, okay, taking away the murder part and, that part that's always with the Joker. The things he's saying are the things that Batman used to say. And now they're being given to the Joker. Like, I don't know. It's very strange. I don't know but I've seen it in multiple stories. Melinda and I've looked over at each other many, many, many times over the last 3 or 4 years, watching a show or a movie where the villain is sort of monologuing or whatever, and we're going, why am I not on this person's side? They seem like they have more common sense. So I don't know what the writers are doing that. Maybe the writers have over-indexed too far over the last 10 to 15 years in trying so hard to make villains relatable that they've muddied up the message, that they've screwed up their own morality tales. Maybe that's what's happened.
That's possible. Real quick, Honest O, thank you for $5 super chat. What do you guys think of JJ? I'm pandering to the lowest common denominator, working with Tim on the Batman TSA crew and coming up with Cape Crusader series. JJ?
I hate J.J. Abrams.
Oh, Abrams, okay.
Yeah. I hate J.J. Abrams as a creator. I don't know anything about him as a person, but I expect I would probably find him pretty obnoxious. But as a creator, I think he's horrible for the film industry, and I don't watch anything that his name is attached to.
Yeah, I'm the same way as Seth Rogen. Real quick, a correction was made here. Mijumaru is, of course, she, they, that's fine. I don't think Michael is reading the chat, Mijumaru, so that's probably more on me. And Badre Bali says, he's been reading the classic Popeye strips, and now he wants a Popeye cartoon that captures the strip's serialized storytelling instead of one-off episodes like the old ones. That's a lot harder to do because of how short those tend to be. Let's see here. Somebody here said, where is it? Animation isn't always for children. We need to normalize and act like it isn't, as well as having stories with actual maturity rather than superficial maturity. Let's see here. Simpsons, Family Guy, anime like Demon Slayer, South Park are still aimed for adults. I'm shocked South Park is still around. Stop watching it in the 90s. Real quick correction. Demon Slayer is technically, I guess you could say, it's for all ages, but it's aimed at kids. It's a shonen. Shonen literally means young boy. There's this misconception we have here in the West because Japanese animation does not adhere to the same standards and practices that a lot of shonen is made for an older adult audience. It's not. Just because it has blood in it doesn't mean that in Japan it's made for an adult audience. A lot of it's made for children. Fist of the North Star is shonen. And he punches people until they explode. It's just a difference in regulation between us and them.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
I want to make one thing clear, just real quick. I have nothing but the utmost respect for everybody's identity and pronouns. But we are on the internet where everybody's behind an avatar. And, I'm not saying you did expect me to just magically know, but if you did, try and like remember that we're all like dealing with like little images of like everybody's favorite pop culture character, and your handle is like loves to spooge. Like it's very difficult to figure out. Like nobody just magically knows that stuff. So everybody needs to have a level of understanding in conversations like this, that it's not like, really? Okay, let's
Yeah,
move forward now.
she does. She's not mad. She's just making sure that's noted.
Yeah.
She's a long term supporter of the channel, so I know these things. It's all right.
Right.
Back to the main topic at hand, though. I think sometimes we're not as consistent as we should be, because I'll have people that'll hardcore say, "Well, source material and source material only," but then they'll turn around, and when you start probing them, and I've done this to other people, specifically in the Transformers fandom, it's like, I want something only like G1 with only G1 characters. Do you like Beast Wars?
Yeah.
Yeah, I love Beast Wars. These things are not compatible. I love Beast Wars. I love G1. Beast Wars had one Generation 1 two Generation 1 characters with actual speaking roles in it. Ravage, who
Right.
shows up in the second season, and Starscream, who, by the way, they retcon, because G1 Starscream was not immortal. He did not have an immortal spark, because that didn't exist in G1 cartoon. So, I just find it odd how inconsistently we sometimes, as a group, apply these things, because Beast Wars isn't like G1. It's written a lot more maturely, and
Right.
it's just far away from the original Transformers. And the original Transformers, Optimus Prime was, I mean, when you look at it objectively through the lens of reality, he's a terrible leader, but in the cartoon, fantastic leader, very few flaws. He's the stalwart. He knows his men, and he knows how to use them. Beast Wars, Optimus fought with his own doggone crew so doggone much because they were so dumb sometimes. He constantly argued with characters. Rat Trap, would you just do what I tell you to? Dinobot, stop trying to fight everybody. The only character he didn't get into it with in the main Maximal crew was Rhinox. Everybody else he was a cat wrangler.
Which you always need one of those on your crew. I just like to say that up front, is that every single crew needs a cat wrangler, or, as G.I. Joe taught me at a very young age, if you can't get a cat wrangler, alligator wrangler will do in a pinch.
This is true.
All right? But just make sure one of those is on your team.
Real quick, Democrabots versus the Republicans, I hate that name, is Lio a progressive Christian? No, I'm just a Christian. Let's see here. Beast Wars is still the best. Don't at me. I do enjoy Beast Wars. I love Beast Wars. I also enjoy Beast Machines, and I will fight people on this. The UK, by Roger Ballard, the UK has family media and its dark moments and violent scenes. Classic Doctor Who is considered a family show, and Animals of Farthing Woods books, AIDS demo, Star City, just, oh man, Animals of Farthing Woods was brutal.
Yeah.
But going back to the consistency, we'll have. I'm still planning on doing like a retrospective on the different Ninja Turtles cartoons to defend Rise. And I went to the Technodrome forums and I asked, hey, what is you people's value here? And there are some people there who are very hardlined. If it is not a one-to-one faithful adaptation of the original comics, I'm not interested. And I can respect that because that guy is consistent.
Yes.
But then we have people that, well, it needs to be X. But then they like something that isn't X. I'm like, what's your reason here? Well, it's just good. What's the value here? Real quick, David, thank you for the £2 super chat. LioConvoy needed to be commander of Primal's crew. Oh, that would have been different. Heck, put Big Convoy in charge of that crew. That would have been wild. Oh God. This $10 super chat, thank you. I'm still shocked that a show like Exo Squad 1993 somehow got passed with censors, a storyline, Starfruit killed main characters, and talked about how slavery is bad and racism and the horror of war. Well, again, in the 90s, we had cartoons, and even in the 80s cartoons, we talked about a lot of that stuff. And again, first episode of Thundercats, a whole bunch of civilians died on screen. It was in spaceships. You didn't see them die individually. Slavery was bad, was talked about in Thundercats as well. Racism to an extent. The horrors of war was talked about in Beast Wars, as well as other animated shows at the time. Watership Down film was dark for a family film. That was a good film, and I will argue about anybody about that. Kal-El48 says, I enjoyed Beast Wars despite being in college at the time. Thankfully, I didn't care what other people thought of my interest at the time. You know what? I've never really cared either. That's why I've always watched cartoons. And why sometimes I'm like the one guy in the room that does not understand a word of what Michael and Tony are talking about. They will go on about films from the '70s or more modern films and talk about its cinematography and its characters. I'm just like, I've never seen that film. I have no clue what they're talking about.
Look, Lyle, you have devoted yourself to, and I'd say this with no irony, no shade, nothing. You have devoted yourself confidently to the study and history of animation, and there's nothing wrong with that. Like a Shaolin monk devotes himself to, perfecting his form and all that kind of stuff for his whole life. I say good on you. Yeah, I found myself adrift, and I'm, watching a bunch of different things, and probably heralds back to my, it's like a smoking gun for my lack of focus. I don't know, but yeah, I do watch a lot of old films. Yeah.
Hold on, real quick. This is in the '90s. The FCC was really after cartoons, primarily after 1996, because that's when they actually started enforcing the legislation they had put into effect previously. That's what killed cartoons at that time. Heck, the 40 Superman radio shows about racism. Yep, Superman and the Clan of the Fiery Cross. And a lot of people got really mad when that comic came out that was an adaptation of it, and they're still mad about it, and they're still dumb for being mad about it. I can't help but like the new Star Wars. To be honest, Finn just drew me into the series in the way no other character did. Yeah, too bad they treated his character so poorly. Those
That's
movies,
what I was about to say.
that I went to see those films out of obligation to my dear sweet wife because she wanted to see them, and the last film,
Oof, Rise of Skywalker.
Yep, I have
Yeah.
never in my life, and before this, I'll tell you what the film that did this before this was. I've never in my life wanted to walk out of a film so much. And the one film that happened before that I wanted to walk out of 3 times was the live action Power Rangers film in 2016. Or not 2016.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, 2016. 2016, 2015. Can't remember which one it was. Or was it 2017? I can't remember. I wanted to walk out of that one too, 3 different times. And I've sat through every single Michael Bay Transformer film. Every single one of them. The only reason I did not walk out of Rise of Skywalker is because my wife was there, and that would have been rude. Otherwise, I would have.
Right.
They treated Finn so poorly. He was a background character, and there's subtext there if you want it. you can do Death of the Author there. And Hagar, that reminds me. What are your thoughts on Shaolin Shogun? Did it continue or did it deserve a continuation? Would you have gone differently with Shaolin Chronicles? Not really a fan of Shaolin Showdown, and I don't think Michael's probably ever seen it.
I know the title, but I have not seen it.
Honestly, Michael, what was the last cartoon you sat down and watched?
Ooh, please, everybody know, cartoons are a good percentage of my job. Just so happens that most of the time people want me to talk about really old ones. The last cartoon I sat down and really watched was Bionic 6 because I did it for that video. And gosh, I'd give anything for those hours back.
What's the most modern cartoon you've sat down and watched?
The most modern one. I'm gonna get this wrong. I know I am because I've seen. The most modern one I watched was I ended up seeing the Captain Carter What If Marvel Agent Carter Peggy Carter What If Marvel thing.
Gotcha.
Where she's, yeah, that's the one. I seen something within the last year, so that's good. Yeah, I've always had my head down in the last few years, as Laya will tell you. Like, I'm playing catch up in other areas. So I'm watching, Juranger right alongside Mighty Morphin, trying to get those ducks in a row, and I'm rewatching, episode by episode right now Thundercats because I'm working on a big collaboration with Lio for that will be coming. Just please, everybody, please be patient. But as far as modern stuff, I don't see much of it. Like it's sad to say, I think of them as modern, but I've got the Blu-ray sets for Justice League Unlimited, which I've seen several times. I've got Batman Brave and the Bold. I've even seen some of the new Marvel Spider-Man stuff, like Spectacular Spider-Man, which isn't new anymore. It's actually old now, but
Yep.
Yeah, that's frightening.
Justice League
Uh,
Unlimited ended like 14 years ago.
yeah, yeah. Oh no, I know it is. I know it is. But I sit there when you ask me, you're like, "What's the most recent cartoon or animated thing you've seen?" And I go, the Agent Carter thing." Like I've been meaning to see Into the Spider-Verse, but I haven't gotten around to it yet. Um, I yeah, that's that's probably a damning indictment. Um, I love anime, but I haven't seen anything new in quite a while. I just bought the Blu-ray set. This is not new, everybody. I just bought the Blu-ray set for the complete series of Cowboy Bebop just to have it in my library. I haven't yet rewatched it.
Is good.
So yeah, yeah.
Oh,
So
real quick, $5 super chat from Megatron of all people. Fantastic. I hated the sequels for what they did to Han, Luke, and Leia, and hated Revelation for what they did to Skeletor. I don't disagree. And honest though, the reason why Avatar has not been mentioned is because I don't need to. Avatar: The Last Airbender
yeah.
was a fantastic cartoon. The problem we have with some more modern stuff is they try to ape it instead of just taking the lessons from it and adapting it. And yes, Koryu
Hmm.
Sentai, Zyuranger. You know, this is Loki now reminded me of Princess Connect retry because good lord, that was a failure on release and now has a polished game and animated show. I don't know any of that. Majumaru is a big fan of stuff like idol anime, and I don't get it,
Hmm.
so I just sort of leave it alone. Uh,
Right, right.
you know the what, you know what also tackled racism sometimes. The classic Lone Ranger and kids were a big part of their target audience. Same thing with some of the Hop Along Cassidy episodes. This is $5 super chat. Thank you. Netflix Arcane. Jinx is better than Harley Quinn than the real Harley Quinn is right now. Wouldn't know. I've never seen that. I'm not a League of Legends fan. Toon Logic Studio says the era of the early 2000s when all those Western action cartoons with Asian leads, Life and Times of Jennifer Lee, American Dragon Jake Long, the former I think copied the latter, Jackie Chan Adventures, etc. Um, let's see here. Was the original Dragon Ball and GT get released on Blu-ray? I think they might be doing that. I'm not really sure. Um, Thoughts on One Piece? I have none. I tried watching it. The anime is way too slow paced. Oddly enough, James E. Talk is a fan of One Piece. So, uh, for those of you who like James E. Talk, enjoy.
I just to give everybody some insight into some of my anime background. For anybody that cares, um, back in the I guess it was about 15 years ago, uh, when they were finally putting out the these what do you call it? Beast King Golion and Die Rugger and all those were finally coming to subtitled DVD. I was able to finally buy those and watch those. I had a friend who was really, really into anime, and he got all excited because I was watching the Japanese originals of these shows. But that wasn't actually his genre. I said, "Well, what do you watch?" And he said, I'm trying to remember the name of the show, and I can't, but he watched comedy harem genre shows
Oh Lord,
in anime. Yeah, right. And he tried to show me one, and I'm trying to remember the name of it.
was it
And
Tenchi
they like
Muyo?
all Tenchi Muyo. That was it.
Uh
Yes.
huh. Poor soul.
Holy crap! You nailed it in one go. Like you literally pulled it out of the filing cabinet of my brain.
It's because I know
Like,
our generation.
yeah, and I was like, okay. And I tried to watch some of it with him. You know, he like brought it over. He was so excited. And I remember watching it going, okay, I get what the characters are saying. I can see the subtitles. I don't really understand what the point of all this is. But all right. Very, very odd experience.
For those of you who are wondering, though, here's the funny thing about Rise. I will unironically say it is the best animated Western cartoon out there. If any of you take a good look at the animatics that are out there, because it's hard to find good clips of the best part, because holy crap, the studio or the company that owns it, Viacom, is worse than Warner Brothers about copyright claims and strikes. But
Hmm.
it's absurdly well animated. You have shows like God, what is that show's name? Amphibia, that try to incorporate anime-esque things into it, and it does not work well, or they try specific animation techniques. So does the studio who does Castlevania. The studio that does Rise actually knows what they are and knows how to use them. Hold
Hmm.
on. Badre Bali says this is for you. This is for Michael. Since you are watching some Sentai, Sunday, could you? Oh, you already saw it. All right then.
Well, no, but I love Ultraman as far as like I've known who he is my whole life. I've never been able to jump in, and I know they just started re-releasing his stuff officially on, I want to say it's like Blu-ray Steelbooks, but it's like, well, where do I start? Like, there's so many series. I guess you start at the beginning and you just start chiseling away. But I would love to do a series by series on things like that for sure.
Juan Carlos Marquez asks what your take on Neon Genesis Evangelion is.
It is a title that I'm very familiar with. I've never gotten around to watching it, but everybody I've talked to says they really like it. So
Except me.
except you. Okay, well, see. So now I'm going in totally neutral because your testimonial carries a lot of weight. So it has just leveled that out a little bit.
I get why people like it, but I
Hmm.
believe not only is it overstated, but I think it's done damage to the mecha genre in a way that nothing else has ever done. And I think
Uh-huh.
that's part of the problem. And I think a lot of people get it wrong. They call it a deconstruction of the mecha genre, but it's not a deconstruction. It's just an inverse. And
Ah.
I hate that people are that illiterate. One thing I do like about Evangelion on a personal level is it has a lot of religious iconography for Christianity. And
Hmm.
I watched Evangelion start to finish. God, I want those hours back. But I watched it and I engaged with people like they're like, well, this is the subtext meaning for XYZ religious symbology. And me, being a Christian, a studied one, I said, no, there's not. There is nothing theological about this series. It's not saying anything about God or religion or Christianity. And these
Hmm.
people, in their sophistry, would get all mad about me. Only for a few years ago, for one of the art directors to be in an interview and say, "Yeah, we put that in there because it looks cool.
Right.
This has no symbolism. It's just it looks cool, so we stuck it on there."
Right.
And
Uh, I
I just love that.
I can answer Michael Bassett's question. Mask has had DVD releases through Shout Factory and other pressings outside the United States in Australia and England, I believe France. But the only way to get and I don't have it, the only way to get the final season, which is the racing season, where they change the format of the show, is one pressing out of Australia from a company called Madman DVDs. I've never been able to find that release. It's out of print, and I know they're on YouTube now. I think from what someone told me, so that's good. As far as Galaxy Rangers, they had a very nice two-volume DVD set officially released many years ago, which I have, but they are now out of print as well. So
Yeah, I tried getting those and I saw their aftermarket price and I laughed and I closed the app. um, let's see here. Same team that worked on Rise work on the Lego Monkey King when the animation. I saw that, but I haven't seen much of it. Do you guys like the original Gundam series? Thoughts on Akira and Ninja Scroll? I love how this has become from like what changes too much to our thoughts on animation, but that's fine. That's welcome to a LioConvoy stream. It never stays on
well,
topic.
maybe they're wanting us to change. Maybe
Perhaps.
that's what's happening. Maybe they've absorbed the message and they're asking us to, adjust a little bit. So,
I've been trying to bully Michael into watching some Gundam, but as always, time's a factor. My hot take is I did not like the original Gundam cartoon. I believe it's way too slowly paced. The animation has a lot of problems, and before anybody says what was animated in the '70s, so it was Gatchaman, and it was animated better. Granted, it was done by the Hanna Barbera of the East, as some people like to call it, but at the same time, it had a lot of problems to it, and a lot of people, I believe, are a bit too sophist about it. Well, the original Gundam was showing that both sides of a war are wrong. No, the original Gundam showed you that the Federation was in the right, and the Principality of Zeon, while having some decent people like Rambaral, um, not the best of places. They literally coded the Xeon forces in German type suits and outfits. They're not dumb. Uh, but I liked what I liked about Gundam. I didn't like the original cartoon, but I loved Zeta, and I think the movie trilogy did a better job of getting the idea across with better animation. And I would always tell people watch the three movies instead of the original Gundam. Origin's fine. And I saw somebody brought that up as being a redo of the original Gundam. It's a prequel, if anything. My thoughts on Akira. Well, animated film has a lot of issues though. Why they decided to adapt a random manga with not any information about it? It's one of those series that has way too many questions, and instead of either doing it with a follow up movie to explain things or a prequel to explain it, you're just expected to absorb it. As far as Ninja Scroll goes, this is going to surprise people. Never saw it.
Oh wow. Okay. I grew up watching that in the '90s in high school. That and Ghost in the Shell.
I did see Ghost in the Shell. I when it comes to stuff like that, there are some anime that have like samurai and ninja that I do like, but I primarily stuck to Chambara films,
Ah, right.
which you can never go wrong with, especially when you had Mifune back in them. That was always cool. Let's see.
Yeah.
Da-da-da. Come on, work with me here. Michael would probably really like Mobile Suit Gundam 08th MS Team. I have yet to find anybody who hates that series. Badre says, plus Anno was a fan of Ultraman and left some Ultraman references that look like religious references. I could be mistaken, but isn't like the creator of Ultraman like one of the very few Christians in Japan? Jason the Wheeled Warriors. Have you guys watched the original Devilman? I haven't, and I will not. Mazinger Z and Berserk. I have seen Mazinger and I have seen Berserk. I don't know if Michael has.
I have Mazinger Z on DVD, and it has the most hilarious bootleg English subtitles that I've ever seen. Like Melinda and I tried to watch it because we saw Voltes 5, and we have that on DVD, and we really like the mecha Sentai stuff, and so we wanted to see the original, the OG, and so we tracked down. This was before, I think Mazinger Z now has an official set, but this was years ago. And we started watching it, and we've kept that DVD set just because we don't think anybody would believe us unless we showed it to them. It is hilarious. It was the meme of buying, that whole meme of when you buy Mazinger Z on Amazon and then you buy it on Wish. Like that was like the DVD set we got. We didn't get it literally on Wish, but that's what it would have been in the meme. It's something else. I'm good. You know what, Lio? I'm gonna burn. I'm gonna rip and I'm gonna rip those discs as they are with the subtitles and send you some files to just check out. Like, it's hilarious.
Oh, that sounds like a mess because I have seen the quote unquote dub for Transformers Headmasters, and I don't know if that can be beat. So it'll be a journey. Real quick,
I'm sure they're comparable.
Real quick here, David. Thank you again for another £3 super chat. The UK had the racing season from Lance DVD Volume 2, or at least.
Oh,
DVD.
good. Well, I'm glad to hear that. I did not know that. Thank you.
And no, Levon, I will. When it comes to live action stuff, here's what I like. I will occasionally see the comic book based movies because I want to see how well they adapt. Newsflash: 99% of them don't do it well. I will always watch a Godzilla film because, it's Godzilla. I'm gonna watch it, and Shambhala films. That's essentially it. Somebody wants to know if you've ever seen the standalone Complex series, which is the Ghost in the Shell anime series, not the movies.
Oh no, I'm aware that Ghost in the Shell has a series. I have not seen it, but I do have the 4K release of the original film. So, yeah.
Let's see here. Have you ever watched Detective Conan: A Case Closed? I have. I really enjoyed it. I'm sad that here in the West we only got 5 seasons. Again, Funimation did the dub for that, and, well, apparently one of their actors got exposed as a sexual deviant, I believe preying on a child, and none of that surprises me. I tried to collect the manga. I got into to volume 10, and then something happened and something damaged all of them, and now they're at like volume 45, and I just do not feel like dropping $450 right now.
Yeah, no, pass.
Granted, case closed. If you like Sherlock Holmes stuff, it is brilliantly written. You're paying for quality, but I'm just not going to pay for all that up front. In regards to the question from a Jumaru fan, would more people be happy if more new shows look back at old iterations like new idols tend to do for their shows and see that the two need to change? That would have to do with continuations, and a lot of modern shows tend to be reboots. And part of the problem is the fact that a lot of them look back at the originals with vitriol for whatever reason. part of that's due to a long-standing misnomer that the 80s was a dark age in animation, and that these were just dumb cartoons made to sell toys. Whereas when you look at it, the reboots don't stand a test of time.
Yeah.
They
Also, oh, sorry. Go ahead. I
no, go
know
ahead.
you're
Go
done.
ahead. No, go ahead.
No, no. I was just gonna say, Purple Artist. My favorite Studio Ghibli movie is Spirited Away, which I saw before Disney ever had it. I saw it a year prior to that from an imported Japanese VHS tape, and it had English subtitles on it. It was very expensive tape. Fell in love with that movie. I like a lot of Studio Ghibli stuff. There's always something to like in all their stuff. Although I do have a hot take about Princess Mononoke. It's not. I don't think it's as hyped or as worthy of the hype as everyone says it is. But my favorite is Spirited Away. So there.
I'll actually agree with you on Princess Mononoke.
Oh, thank God. Thank God. So.
Action Figure Expert says, I tried to look for Tranzor Z or the American version of Mazinger Z. I don't know if that ever got released or even if they could now. There's a lot of rights issues.
I've only ever seen clips of like the intro on YouTube and stuff. I've rarely seen any full episodes, and I remember seeing that on cable back in the '80s when I was a kid. But yeah, I haven't seen it since.
I think there's a lot that has to change if things are going to get any better in animation or in continuations or reboots of these old properties. And part of the problem is that these corporations that handle them, they don't care about them.
Right.
All the stuff that we grew up with had a lot of people with a lot of hands and a lot of care about these products. That's why you've got that clip, and I posted it on Twitter, and people are still to this day still pulling it, of Lou Scheimer saying, people tell me we wrote stories to sell toys. I didn't give an F about toys. I wanted to tell good stories for kids.
Yeah.
Which is the reality of most 80s cartoons. Are all of them like that? No.
No.
No, they're not. Rodimus Primal says he's free, so shoot, we're on Discord. So let me see. I think we might still have that group chat on Facebook. Let me see if I can pull that up. And then I'll just dial you guys in. Or may have been with Bobby.
Oh, Bobby.
Bobby. That kid. Let's see here. I'll just we'll have to switch over to Facebook here, which again is fine. Let me see here. Oh God, I hate this dumb thing. Let's try it like this. Work. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and hang up here, and then I'll dial in there, and we'll continue this and then finish it out.
All right.
All right, people, bear with me. Got to make sure they're both there. So excuse me for ignoring the chat temporarily. Lou Scheimer clip was from an interview, I believe, on the Filmation DVD sets. All right, so let me go ahead and wait for Michael to respond, and I can make the call. All right, they're both there, so haha. Call it.
Hi, everybody.
Hello.
Hello. Hi, everybody.
What one of you is echoing?
I got headphones on, so it can't be me.
Rodimus.
Hold on a second.
It's all right.
Am I? Is you still hear an echo? I can put my headphones in. It's not a big deal.
Let me see here. Doesn't sound like we're echoing now. All right.
Okay.
Real quick, as a Death Battle fan, I would love to see you tear apart He-Man versus Lion-O. I want to do that. I've been planning to for a while, but I'm not Death Battle, so I'm going to do some research on all of it. I want to cover every single mini-comic, original DC run, and cartoon for He-Man. And figure out what all of his abilities are based on that, because that's how we're going to do this. Real quick, thank you again for joining us, Rodimus. Sorry it's on such short notice. I
It's all good.
Yeah, I didn't want to interrupt your night because I know what you do on Saturday nights.
Yeah. I didn't get what's it called? I didn't get home until like we didn't get actually got out late because it's a longer service than usual, but not a big deal.
Nothing wrong with that. Let's see here. Impossible Pie, Michael says, do you have an all-time favorite anime or animated movie you watch on a regular basis?
Oh, all-time favorite anime or animated movie. Gosh. I mean, just for the sake of it saving Voltron for me for all time, because Voltron did not age as well as I would have hoped. Beast King Go Lion saved my bacon on that. Now, that is a nostalgic choice because I know objectively it's not the greatest anime of all time or anything like that. I really, really enjoy Super Dimension Fortress Macross, and I think that it's earned all the praise that has been heaped on it over the years. And I didn't see that till I was an adult, so that would probably be my favorite anime of all time. If you had to, put my feet to the fire. Yeah.
All right.
I've not seen it outside of it being called Robotech, unfortunately.
Oh, well, my friend, you got to take that first step into a larger world.
I know, believe me. Same thing with like Voltron. I've only seen episodes of Beast King Go Lion. Like I've seen a lot of it, but not enough to say like I've seen the whole thing. Like I know how different Voltron is to Beast King Go Lion.
Yeah.
And but the music in OG Voltron,
yeah, the music is what saves it. The music is still holds up to this day. I'm not saying that Voltron itself is complete trash or anything like that. I'm just saying that it's kind of like that movie that you watched 100 times as a kid, and then you realize that movie didn't hold up the same way Star Wars did. Like you see it as an adult, and you're like, oof. But thank God that Voltron actually had an original Japanese version that then redeems it so that you can still watch it without cringing too much. Minus the music, which the music in Voltron was awesome. Like
yes, it was. Yeah. Especially that pretty much the entire theme music of it is like what everybody remembers.
Yeah. That's why I keep my Voltron official DVDs, because I want that opening with the haunting music and Peter Cullen's narration and stuff like that. And Melinda will look, my wife, she'll look over at me because she never saw Voltron as a kid. She's only watched Beast King Go Lion with me, and she loves it. So every time I watch the Voltron version, she goes, how can you stand this? I'm like, it's still, for me, memories. Like, it's still the way I was originally exposed to it.
Yeah.
So
what did you watch the Netflix series or no?
I haven't watched the Netflix series. The last one I saw was Voltron Force. And then after that,
The Netflix series is surprisingly pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
It takes a lot of liberties in places.
Sure.
Which is kind of funny that we're talking about this because it's like, and by the way, your video was brilliant. I got to say that. Like I watched the video last night. When I saw it come up, I was like, interesting. I want to watch this. I actually watched the whole thing. I want to say there's some things that like I was kind of like, maybe not. Like, but then again, like you even said, like not all series, are bad just because they do a reboot or do a continuation,
right?
But some of us, we grow attached to our favorite franchises, and like then again, there's room for more. There's room to have more stories.
Sure.
Out of different franchises, like make more franchises, make more original IPs.
Yeah, that's the whole thing. It's like, why do some people? Let's just take it out of the realm of these 10 franchises and just grab a different example. Let's take Robin Hood as a concept. Some people are like, I just want to read Robin Hood stories, derivations of Robin Hood stories, and more Robin Hood stories for the rest of my life. I don't want to watch anything else if it doesn't have anything to do with Robin Hood. Like I just Robin Hood all the time. Robin Hood. And it's like you want to look at him and go, yeah, but what's wrong with having that one definitive Robin Hood story and then 7 other different stories next to it? Now, like I said, there are some stories that deserve a series. That's what makes them complete. There are others though where you go, did this really need to continue 35 years after it ended? Did we really need to literally dust off the actors and prop them up with yardsticks to put them back in these films for one more go. Like, it just, I don't know. The track record on that isn't great.
No,
So,
it's the sequelitis problem. But
yeah.
Robin Hood specifically, actually, I found this out very recently, and I did not know this because someone who's like a hardcore Robin Hood like aficionado, I guess, is that there's actually 3 different Robins, technically speaking.
Yeah.
And so like I was like, wow, I did not know that. Like I only knew like because every time you watch like a Robin Hood movie, it's always based on an amalgamation of the 3 different Robin Hoods.
Yeah.
And it's never actually just different like people.
Because he's literally he's folklore at this point. Yeah. He's like, Perseus at this point. Like there's no real way to pin that character down. But it's just using it as an example of, we all kind of have that one version, like you said, that amalgamated version that we go to, that we read. And similarly, do we really need to have like a Star Wars series that's all about the janitor on Cloud City? Like, do we really need that? Because it's coming. Like there will be, it will happen. Like there will be, and that's where I'm getting at. Like earlier on in the conversation. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Almost to rebut that in a sense, that would be an original story based in a universe that the outside events don't necessarily have to occur or don't have to happen around. That's different.
Right.
It's kind of almost like the way that the Mandalorian.
Yes.
How it doesn't tie itself to it's deeply embedded in the Star Wars universe, but it doesn't necessarily need for you to know so much about it until you get to season 2.
Right. But notice, and you're right in saying this, that would be an original idea. But that reaction is only happening because we've been inundated with so much derivative Star Wars that when you hear that pitch, your brain goes, well, at least that's an original idea. But is it? But it's the Ian Malcolm thing. It's like, yeah, but we're so preoccupied if we could that we don't stop to think if we should.
Right.
And I don't need to see the story of Wilro Hood, the guy running around the corner with the ice cream machine under his arm. I don't need that miniseries. I don't need, that. Lio and I were talking earlier in the stream about how there are completely different versions of the Ninja Turtles that have come out over the years. And it's like, at least there, Rise of the Ninja Turtles is not trying to say that it is some kind of retconned continuation of the 2003 Ninja Turtles. They're not, in other words, they're not piling on to one another. They're all individual. Whereas with Star Wars, it's like, hey, everything we do is going to have to fit into this in your brain. And good luck trying to sort it all out.
Yeah.
And you go, like, why? Like, Yeah.
I feel like to me the prequels completed the story. In a sense that like they're not my brother-in-law said it best. He's like the prequel trilogies are not great movies, but they're great Star Wars movies. In that they're made to complement the original trilogy.
Sure.
But whereas whereas everything that came after was like, not only were they bad movies, but they were also bad Star Wars films, but they didn't, instead of continuing the story, which they didn't need to do, Return of the Jedi was an ending that needed to be an ending.
Right.
It felt like it was like, well, we just need to like cash in on the fact that we own Star Wars now.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it really felt like corporate, let's remake A New Hope again. And we'll do it with brand new characters, and they're just awesome because they're awesome.
But that's the thing, they did it in continuity. That's what's shocking to me. It's like if they said we're going to relaunch Star Wars under the Disney brand now that we own the IP, and we're going to start from ground zero and remake the original story in our own image and make this the new starting point for this new Disney universe of Star Wars, then I'd be less inclined to be like, huh?
Right.
But like, why on earth are you repeating the same series of events And I don't want to hear that. Like, I don't want to hear from people. They always do. Well, George Lucas said it rhymes. It's like poetry. I'm like, that's not the same thing. That's not what he was saying.
Yeah.
Like, but I often ask myself, the original print of Star Wars didn't say Episode 4. It just said Star Wars,
well, let's not even get to the fact that George Lucas's original pitch, it wasn't exactly what was made, thanks to his wife who saved Star Wars.
Oh, absolutely, things evolved before they get to to the camera.
Yeah.
But what I'm thinking is, like, what if Empire and Jedi had never had an episode moniker in front of them? What if it was just Star Wars, The Empire Strikes Back, Return of the Jedi? I gotta be honest, that's the complete story. I don't really need to know.
The only reason why it was even Episode 5 to begin with was because it felt like what it really was Lucas was kind of going like, let's make it like another serial, like when you go to see serials, and it had an episode title on it. Let's just throw Episode 5, and so in other words, you're saying is that there were 4 more stories that happened, or 3 more stories that happened in between the last movie and this one,
right?
That was my first impression when I first saw the original trilogy, and I saw Empire Strikes Back. Because I could say like Return of the Jedi was the first film I ever saw theatrically, because I was old enough to actually see it, because it didn't exist before Empire Strikes Back. But like you didn't when you ended up first seeing it, I'm like, okay, well, this is Episode 5. What happened in between? And they even say like all these epic things happened in between. Like, hey, like the last bounty hunter almost got me. I have to leave. Like that was something that Han Solo said in Empire.
Yeah,
and it didn't feel like it was necessary to be, to have all of these movies that take place before or after. It really felt like it was a definitive end at the end of Return of the Jedi, and it was a complete story of redemption.
Yeah,
family and redemption.
Yeah,
was the themes behind the original Star Wars trilogy.
And that's why dramatically I've never been as interested, because of the way they build to the reveal of Darth Vader being Luke's father. I've never been interested in going back and figuring out what happened between Obi-Wan and Anakin, because enough of it is inferred that it's like, oh, this is this tragic backstory that Luke will never really know, because he was an orphan or whatever. He'll never know exactly what happened, and he's thrust into these circumstances. And so I, as the viewer, am going through this through Luke's eyes. I don't really need to know all this either. Like, I'm on the journey with Luke. I'm not getting in Doc Brown's time machine and then gonna go back. And it always felt superfluous to me. It was like, I don't know if we really need that. I liked Ewan McGregor as Obi-Wan Kenobi. I liked some of the action scenes. I just don't know if we needed it. That's what
I've heard from a lot of people say that like Revenge of the Sith is the only movie that is really a quote unquote necessary prequel. And it should always be watched after the original trilogy.
Right.
Like I always say, like, you should always watch it in release order.
Yep.
Not before that point, because the whole point of Empire, the weight of Empire Strikes Back, is completely told in that reveal.
Yeah, totally.
And that reveal was so huge that Luke, and I think Luke was the only one who knew when they made the movie. Or was it Luke and the director?
Yep. That's right.
Like, in other words, what I'm saying is like even I think David Prowse was just saying lines.
Yeah, he was saying Obi-Wan killed your father. That was the backup line. Yeah.
And so like that was just kind of interesting to read about all of that kind of stuff. But that's just not getting away from Star Wars. Like, we look at other franchises, like it's the same thing. Like, we just keep on churning another movie, another story. Like you said in your movie, Jaws 19. Like I said, Back to the Future.
Yeah. Yeah. Notice now they can't even. They're like, you know what? We need so much Superman, Batman, Marvel, this and that. We're just gonna hand ourselves over to the multiverse theory, so we can have like 20 different productions of Batman and Superman at the same time with different actors, and we're just gonna fire hose that.
You want to hear something interesting that I remember back? There was a legal problem with Warner Brothers back in, I want to say it was 2010, 2011, somewhere around there, or it would be 2009. because there was a legal dispute between the Schuster and the Siegel families. They were suing DC or Warner Brothers to get the rights to Superman back. They're like, you're not getting a dime. And so the judge pretty much was like, look, you make a movie or you're going to lose the rights. And so Man of Steel was made.
Give me a break.
Yeah.
Like, just have some class and give them back their estate. Good
Either
Lord.
give them their estate or at least pay the people. Their names created the characters.
Yep.
You know, give them some, you know, recompense, seriously. Like, you know, and then make a good Superman story moving forward.
They won't, because these corporations are horrifically, they're not even amoral, they're just immoral.
Yeah.
Good God. Also, I did not even know that dude running around with an ice cream maker had a name.
I didn't either. That's the whole thing. I didn't either until a few years ago when I was like walking through a Walmart and I saw the action figure like hanging on pegs. And I went, seriously? And I walked up and I was like, it is the guy. Oh my God, he's got a name. And this was before Disney. This was before Disney took over. This was quite a while ago. And I was like, really? And so like all these characters now having names is just so bizarre to me. It's like every character has a name and an involved story that was told in some book or comic book or coloring book or this or that. And you just go, do I really need to know the whole convoluted story about the little bat looking guy that grabs a plastic cup from the bartender at the cantina? Do I really need to know like what his day was like? Like, I don't. That's where I think fanboys start to get so cloistered in these franchises that, like you were talking about earlier, Thomas, they stop learning new things about life and about other pieces of art, other pieces of entertainment, I don't know. It's I don't know how to fully express myself at this point. I'm practically clammed up from just bewilderment. Can you imagine spending the next 35 years of your life only absorbed in like Star Wars and Marvel with the occasional side of Ghostbusters forever? Like,
I'm a Transformers guy, but
well, I know that, but everybody has their big thing, but it doesn't mean it's their only thing. But for some people, that's the only thing they do.
Right.
And you just go, and these people are not like, Morlocks. Like you look at them and go, well, you got 10 fingers and toes, and you can form a complete sentence. Why would you cloister yourself mentally in this one space all the time?
In fact, if anything, the reason why it's good to diversify your fandoms, so to speak, is because it helps you enjoy the thing that you really love the most.
Right.
So, like, currently I've been watching a lot of anime. Just finished JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. Just started the first season of Attack on Titan. Watched through the first season of Demon Slayer. Interesting storytelling. But I'm still a Transformers guy.
Right.
I'll watch, Cobra Kai. I'll watch all these other TV shows and, whatever. But I really enjoy Transformers. It doesn't stop me from enjoying Transformers, but I'm able to enjoy other stories too.
Do you sometimes find yourself, and this is not, I'm not trying to paint you into a corner or trap you and play gotcha. I'm asking an intellectual question.
Yep.
Do you sometimes find yourself with the Transformers brand feeling obligated to see everything? Like maybe there's something Transformers that they've said is coming out, and you find yourself going, I don't know if I'm as interested in that, but I have to see it because I feel like Transformers and my personality are intertwined.
If I did not have a YouTube channel
that
was based on Transformers,
right,
I might not be watching BotBots.
Okay, there we go. Yeah.
Like, I might, I might not have gone out of my way to watch all of Robots in Disguise 2015. But I'm a G1 hardcore, so like I'm obviously going to watch the Japanese stuff.
Right.
You know, like I'm gonna like I have currently on my desk right now Headmasters, Master Force, and Victory
Sure.
sitting on my desk.
Yeah.
You know,
I,
but it's tied to the G1 universe.
sure.
You know,
Sure.
I love Beast Wars, but you know,
Well,
to me, like some of the newer stuff just doesn't have the same appeal. You know, and I would probably move it. You know, if I did not have a YouTube channel that was focused on Transformers, that really needed to focus on it,
mm-hmm.
it's kind of like, would I be watching it? I don't know.
I'll tell you, I grew up in the G1 era, of course, and then
Right.
as I got into high school, that was when Beast Wars came out, and I remember at the time I saw some images, like clips of the show when I was channel surfing, but I never sat down to watch it because I was aging out. But I remember the toys in Toys R Us very clearly. Well,
Yep.
you know, years go by, as we've just talked about, these franchises have all piled on and piled on and piled on, and everything's become so derivative. There are so many red Optimus Prime truck transforming action figures in all these variants that have happened over the last 35 years. You can't even count them at this point. People, as you know, there are people that just collect Optimus Primes, like, because there's so many, you'll never actually get them all. There's even a Mr. Potato Head that is Optimus Prime. Like, that's where we are. And so Lio sent me out of nowhere, because he's been actively campaigning to get me to finally watch Beast Wars. I'm not opposed to watching, I just haven't carved out the time. And he sent me the G1 re-releases, or Beast Wars re-releases, I should say. And I'm looking over at them occasionally, because they're right here by my desk. I'm looking at them right now. And the other day, I caught myself looking over at them going, that is actually different. Those are different. And that is now very interesting to me.
I love what the writers did with Beast Wars. And, you know, Lio knows this. The writers were from He-Man. They had no knowledge of Transformers going in.
Right.
They knew it existed. They knew there was a cartoon. They knew there was a toy line. They knew that there was even a comic book, that even the G2 comic book that had come out in the early 90s and failed. Which is why Beast Wars was made in the first place, was because of G2's failure.
Yeah.
But so they made the first two episodes with TV budget CG animation, which was groundbreaking at the time. You know, I think, you know, I mean, Reboot had come before, and they decided, because the original show existed, they decided to have the conversation to say, remember the Great War, Rat Trap. We don't want that to happen again. And what it basically did is it acknowledged the original, but it's so far removed that it allowed it to exist.
Sure.
But we're different people now. You know, we're different characters. And so I thought that was really brilliant, because then it opened the door for the writers to then engage with the fans. And then the writers then learned about the original show by watching a few episodes, watching the 86 movie, and incorporating it into the show. And then when you watch season 2, there's a big thing that happens in season 2. That it was that thing in season 2, which I'm not going to spoil for you until you watch it, even though the show's now like 25 years old. It just basically was like, oh my gosh, we're like, this is like so connected, but it never was created to be connected, and it allowed it to be fresh and new, because it was written by people who also knew how to write good stories. And they were more interested in writing good stories, because they were also from He-Man. They wrote good stories when they wrote He-Man. So,
Lio's been waiting for me to do a video about these toys, and I gotta tell you, the waiting and the percolating to get me to this point, it's going to make that video all the more fun to watch, because I really am looking at these going, this is so deliciously unconventional and bizarre, and that is exactly what I'm hungry for now, because everything has become so homogenized with these franchises that have been swallowed up. It's how many different action figures of Snake Eyes and Storm Shadow does one human really need in their lifetime? How many different times are we going to be asked to buy the same 4 Ghostbusters action figures from different companies over and over and over again? And do I really need to buy that 150th Darth Vader action figure? Like I look over and I go, hey, that's supposed to be Optimus Prime, but he's not a red truck anymore. He's a silverback gorilla. Holy crap, this is the greatest thing ever. This is
not Optimus Prime. It's a different character.
Right. I'm just being facetious
right.
when I say
but
that.
When the character was conceived, it was conceived to be Optimus Prime got an upgrade into a gorilla. The cartoon makers just were like, it's a brand new character.
Yeah.
Even the Megatron show turning into T-Rex is a brand new character.
Uh-huh.
And you'll understand when you watch the show, it acknowledges it. And I thought it was brilliantly done that way.
Mm-hmm.
And, it kind of like, imagine, I don't know, your name is Michael French, right?
Mm-hmm.
Imagine we create a TV series about you or whatever, and then 20 years from now we make a TV show and a guy is named Michael Furion.
Uh-huh.
And he kind of looks like you, and he's
right.
based on your personality and is different, very different in personality. Imagine kind of like that's the best way I can describe it.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah. And I love Beast Wars. Like I really do. It is where Primal comes from. I brought him as Primal.
Mm-hmm.
So, but I'm still a G1 guy, and you grew up in the G1 era.
Yeah.
But, I mean, we can move on from Transformers too. Like I can talk about other franchises too, if you guys would like. I know we're like once we start getting in, I get into Transformers, or you get into Star Wars, or Lyle gets into Thundercats. It's
Well,
I'd like to just point out I'm happy to move away from Star Wars. I am so over talking about Star Wars. You go right ahead.
but Michael, without Star Wars, what personality will you have? Your personality must be rooted in the thing you like, and you must defend it with fervency and with religious obsession.
That's true. That's true. I will just be a listless individual with a soulless existence, I guess, at this point, according to corporations. Yeah.
Oh, and real quick to the chat, you're wrong. I'm not fiddling with a Gundam or a Transformer. I'm fiddling with a Brave toy. I'm fiddling with X-Kaiser, and he's really cool.
250th Darth Vader made me think about the fact that I just reviewed a toy that I double dipped on, because the first figure that came out last year, the colors were not that good, and then they re-released it as a Target exclusive with animation accurate colors, and I'm like, no, why do I have to buy this toy a second time?
Oh, that hurts.
I bought it a second time.
That hurts.
Is that Coronation Starscream you're talking about?
No, I'm talking about Studio Series, the Buzzworthy Bumblebee Cup.
Oh, the cup. I was looking at him, I was thinking about double dipping, but then I'm like, do I really need to, though?
I bought the second one, and the second one looks nicer, in my opinion, but some people actually said they like the first release better.
Well, I'm not going to argue the second one looks leagues better. Again, I'm all for animation accuracy, but there's that part of me is like, I bought this other one like not too long ago. Do I really need this one because it has a brand new hat?
Right. Yeah, it's the same thing with Starscream. A lot of people said the same thing about Starscream, but I have an ulterior motive with that Starscream.
You're going to customize them, aren't you?
Yes.
Uh-huh.
I'm gonna not the one that comes the Coronation one. I'm gonna customize the first one I got, and I'm gonna take the head off because I don't like the fact that Skywarp has a gaping mouth.
He won't shut up, David.
Yeah.
David, it's not the MP X Kaiser. This is the OG X Kaiser from the 90s. This is this is from the Brave show, X Kaiser that in a few cases recycled and reused both Transformers characters and design and toys. So if you've ever seen that red Deathsaurus running around, it's from this series.
Speaking of, I saw in the chat someone was talking about Zone. Zone was only an OVA that was completed in the manga, and if you got volume 3 of the manga, that's the completion of that story.
And don't try to buy the Diatlas toy. You will be in debt. God.
No, thank you. No, thank you. That's kind of where I draw the line, like going a little bit farther into my collection. Like I do want that. I mean, I'm getting that Star Saber or Victory Saber, but
yeah. But like for G1 Grandis, I was thinking about picking them up because like, you know what, I kind of like big boxy ones. Then I saw the price, I'm like, no, I'm not paying over $1,000 for a box that lays down.
Yeah.
And yes,
what are some other stuff that we've probably been seeing a lot of reboots of lately?
Well,
they're doing the Disney afternoon into movies that they're making fun of now.
Yeah, I'm not thrilled, and I will not be partaking in it. And for some god awful reason, they keep giving Seth Rogen things.
Yeah.
Why is he behind the new Ninja Turtles and the new Darkwing Duck? What idiot got hopped up on coke and gave that to him?
Probably his supplier, who is probably on the board at Disney. I'm just making stuff up there. No, that's just me.
It would not surprise me, but just good God. I was talking about Grandis, Wes. MP Star Saber's nowhere near $1,000. Although I do have him. I got him for like $120 at a toy show years ago. Monster in My Pocket is getting a new cartoon also. I mean, I kind of figured Monster in My Pocket would have died a long time ago when the Pokemon craze started and has never stopped. But right now we're sitting at over 2 hours, and I think it's probably about time to draw this all to a close. So I appreciate you hopping on, Rodimus. Next time we'll see if we'll schedule this.
Sorry about coming in so late.
Nah, you got a life to live. You got a life to live.
Yeah.
You still alive over there, Michael?
Oh yeah, I'm right here. I was letting the third guest, get some airtime and, listening to what he had to say.
All right.
I appreciate you guys having me.
Anytime. Next time I have to do something like this, I'll try to schedule it on a night you're not in church. But thank you all for joining us, and hopefully we didn't get too lost in the weeds on this. And we'll chat with you guys later. I got a couple videos coming out this weekend that I hope you all enjoy. Take it easy.
All right. Thanks for having me.